Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the bodybuilding diet. While I personally believe that every single human at some point in their life should participate in a bodybuilding diet, all the incredible benefits that a bodybuilding diet can impart on your life, and ultimately, I'm going to teach you how to operationalize it in this podcast. Sit tuned. Here we go. All right, everybody, Ben Pakulski. We're talking about the bodybuilding diet, something I participated in for a very long time. I started my first ever bodybuilding style diet at 17 years old. And now having young boys and girls, children that I'm ultimately starting to understand how their palates work, it's interesting to look back on my life and how the bodybuilding diet started for me as early as 17 years old. I hired a bodybuilding coach and he said, hey, here's what you got to eat. And there was no sauces allowed, no salt allowed. Basically, we're eating plain foods, no oils. And I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you this is what happened for me at 17. And so I was eating egg whites with no ketchup and no salt and no whatever else people put on it. And I was eating tuna, and I was allowed to have mustard. And I was eating chicken breast. I was also allowed to have mustard. Mustard was the only condiment I was allowed to have, and I hated mustard at the time. Now I'm obsessed. And I'm like, okay, so this is how bodybuilders eat. So it was rice cakes, white rice, potatoes, vegetables, broccoli, asparagus, limited even number in the vegetables. I would get some carrots from time to time. I would get some celery and some really, really unbelievably basic foods. And this is what I was taught was the bodybuilding diet. And it was dreadful. For the first 3 years of my bodybuilding call it lifestyle, it was dreadful. And I hated food. I hated eating. I would sit there and literally make myself, retch as I tried to get all this food in. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. It's so difficult. After a certain amount of time of eating a lower calorie diet, what I started to notice is being in a caloric deficit allowed me to be so hungry that I was really just appreciative to eat any foods. So now all of a sudden, a sweet potato or a baked potato tasted unbelievable. The natural flavors of the food started to come through, and I would look forward to the ability to eat a potato, plain, nothing on it, or a sweet potato, baked, nothing on it. And then chicken would have this incredible taste, and you learn to cook it differently. And sometimes I would grill, and sometimes I would fry in a pan, and I would develop a palate for how these things tasted. When I started at 17, it was repulsive to me because I was at that point in my life comparing it against all these other hyper-palatable foods that I had been accustomed to eating my entire life. Certainly anything I would eat would be either drowning in ketchup or barbecue sauce or have some type of gourmet sauce that my mother would cook or someone else. And I'd go out to a restaurant or it would be deep fried. I'd be going to Chick-fil-A or KFC or something like that, or, a burger joint, eating these really hyper-palatable, high-fat, loaded with salt foods. And when you gave me natural foods, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't stomach it. And it took me a long time, almost 3 years before I really started to understand the value of what I had gone through. And had I not been in a caloric deficit where I was so grateful to be able to eat anything, I was a soldier. So anything that I put in my mouth, I learned after a while, to really appreciate. And because, if you're in a caloric deficit for 3 or 4 months, you're hungry always. You're never not hungry. So I would finish a meal and still be hungry. I remember eating a meal and squirting mustard in my mouth from the jar because I was still so hungry. And you start to learn these different ways to hack hunger and hack your brain. And so, some meals I would consume 1.5 liters of water 30 minutes before I ate with a bunch of electrolytes. And then, allow that water to sort of pass through me, and then I would eat, and that would sort of curb my hunger a little bit. And I don't want to make this podcast about all the things I did back in the past. I want to help you operationalize it. But the point of this story is to really start to convey the value of what it actually looks like to, 1, be in a caloric deficit for a long period of time, 2, allow your brain to develop differently and move away from this constant expectation of hyper-palatable foods. My son is very much in this state right now where if you give him the option of eating like a steak or a protein bar. He's going to choose the protein bar. And, right, not the worst thing in the world, of course, but it's certainly not the same as eating steak and potato and vegetable, these whole foods that we know are also coming with really high quality fats, really high quality micronutrients and vitamins and minerals that his body needs to thrive and grow. But his brain goes, this is easy, these calories in this protein bar, easy. They're high calorie, they're dense and fast. So your brain has evolved to consume, like, I want these calories fast. I want them now. I don't want to have to work for the calories, right? If I tell you there's a beautiful gourmet dinner after this 10-mile walk, or you can just eat this, 5,000 calorie bowl of something or 1,000 calorie bowl of something right here, that's like hyper-palatable. Your brain's always going to choose less caloric expenditure and more caloric consumption. That's the way we've evolved to conserve energy and to keep you alive. And the bodybuilding diet is, in my mind, a beautiful opportunity to train your brain, to train your nervous system, to train your impulses, to choose the things that are best for you, rewire your brain, and ultimately not have to constantly crave not have to constantly require these hyper-palatable foods. So how do we operationalize that? And is it necessary to go to the extremes that I did? Absolutely not. Like, can you eat salt? Yes. Can you eat condiments? Sure. Maybe not if you're getting ready for a Mr. Olympia or a contest, because that's just extra calories, extra sugar, extra toxins in many cases, even with these low-calorie, zero-calorie sauces. Like, are they good for you? No. Like, are they going to kill you? No. But if you consume enough of them, they could certainly be driving increased toxicity and other things that, I'm not going to try to sensationalize. But so if you're trying to operationalize what I'm conveying here, it's my encouragement to everyone is do a 12-week bodybuilding diet where you eliminate anything that's hyper-palatable. You're only eating whole foods. So there's no sauces, there's no ketchup, there's no, certainly barbecue sauce. There's no butter. There's nothing that's gonna have a high dense amount of calories in one place. Even as a bodybuilder, eliminating steak later or even ground meats later in a prep is another level, because ground meats ultimately is condensed calories, right? You're taking something that you would ultimately have to work for in like a large roast or steak, and then putting it down to something that's condensed calories. And so your brain goes, I'll choose the ground meats over the steak any day, because the ground meats I can consume so fast and so much. The steak requires chewing and time to get into you. So, if you're operationalizing this, we're effectively moving away from anything that's calorically really dense and easy to consume toward things that are slightly calorically less dense and take a little more work. So if I were to give you raw broccoli versus cooked broccoli, one, most people would choose the flavor of cooked broccoli, but they'll also choose the ease of consumption. It's like easier to eat. I can get more of it in. Therefore, my brain is going to go, I like this more. Whereas the raw broccoli may actually have more nutrients for you. You could argue that it's got phytic acid and other things that are not good for you, but at the end of the day, it's certainly going to be, seemingly going to be more useful and certainly lower glycemic. So if you're someone right now who's looking to lose weight, if you're someone right now who's looking to improve your impulse control, to improve your dopamine addictions, and that crosses all genres, right? Dopamine addiction goes anything from pornography, social media, hyperpalatable foods, certainly drugs and alcohol. All those things are just dopamine drivers, and we become dopamine addicts. We become these hedonic creatures, like I need this thing and I need this thing. And so participating in a 12-week bodybuilding diet, at least 12 weeks, where you're in a caloric deficit and potentially a progressively greater caloric deficit over time. So let's say you need 2,500 calories or 3,000 calories. We start at 10% deficit, right? And we say we're going to start you at 2,250. And that's not enough of a deficit to make you uncomfortable. Although if you did it for a month, I suspect you'd start to, one, lose a bunch of weight, a bunch of fat. Two, start to understand and appreciate food. You start to understand and appreciate like just the beauty and the value of eating a carrot or eating a potato or eating a piece of steak. Like, oh man, this is so good. Because being in that caloric deficit, your brain is going to cleanse that palate. You're not eating these hyperpalatable foods, and your brain will appreciate all of the array of flavors that exist inside of these foods. So starting in the beginning in this place where you're eating these hyper-palatable foods and you're eating impulsively. You're like, oh, I'm going to throw some blueberries in. I'm going to eat some rice cakes. I'm going to eat whatever. And there's impulsive. Whereas the bodybuilding diet is not impulsive, is it? It's very methodical. I eat at 9. I eat at 12. I eat at 3. I eat at 6. So you got 4 meals, maybe 5, depending. So if you're trying to grow into a show, generally you can go 5, 6, even 7 meals. If you're somebody who's trying to diet into a show, like losing body fat, generally 4 meals is adequate. So it's, let's say 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m. You've got 4 meals. So this reduced eating window as well as, these timed meals, because what often will happen is your brain will go, I'm bored. I'm a little bit hungry. Maybe my blood sugar is a little bit wonky. Let me go just grab something really quick. Well, as a bodybuilding diet goes, no, you eat at 9 and 12 and 3 and 6. And so you learn to control those impulses. And the reason I encourage everyone to do this is not because of the fat loss benefits. It's because of the life benefits, right? Imagine being able to control your impulses always. Like, I don't have to succumb to the hedonic marketing that I'm constantly exposed to, or the, constant distraction, like I'm a squirrel trying to catch a nut. Following a bodybuilding diet meticulously, as I did for 18 years, afforded me the opportunity to have unbelievable impulse control if I choose to, right? I can choose to not do. I can be relaxed about it. Like, yeah, no problem. Let's eat a donut. Or I can say, no, I just don't do that. And even though, I think a lot of people think that as a bodybuilder, I don't think about eating pizza, or I don't want to eat ice cream, or I don't want to eat cookies. Of course I do. Every human being would choose those foods for sure, because it's evolutionary. Like, I want to consume as many calories as I can, because generally I'm expecting a famine, right? This is something that's evolved for us. Now, there's a lot of genetic considerations here. Some people have less likelihood to overconsume than others. Some people have a greater ability to control insulin than others, and glucose, and some people have a better ability to control inflammation than others, and innumerable other genes. It's called polygenic. This ability to control your appetite, ability to control behavior is absolutely genetic. And you can start, as you start looking at how to create the most effective bodybuilding diet for you. If you're not looking at your genetics, you're certainly missing a pretty big opportunity, a pretty big piece of the puzzle. Not something I certainly did as a bodybuilder, a young bodybuilder, didn't exist. But now in this, 35 plus male demographic that we work with, we run genetics as many people as we can, as many people are willing, because it allows us to, it took me, 10, 15 years, 12 years maybe, to really figure out what my body actually needed in a prep. Maybe you could say I'm a slow learner, but really it was like, well, I don't know. I don't know what type of diet I need. And for me, it's kind of not complex. I need probably 30% protein, 30% fat, 40% carb. And so, how do I distribute that? I need 3,000 calories a day, distribute that amongst those nutrients. And then there's another sub-level beneath that. Like, just because I'm eating 30% of my calories from carbs, let's say it's 900 calories, from fat, proteins. Well, what proteins, right? Am I eating all lean proteins? Am I eating all fatty proteins? Am I eating a different array of proteins? Because if it's all chicken, that's really different than eating chicken and eggs and beef and venison and whatever else. And so am I getting an array of different sources of protein? And then if I need 30% of my calories from fat, well, not all fat is created equal, and you know that. And not all fat is best consumed at the same time. For example, if you have this ApoE4 allele, your best way to consume fats is really, really low amounts, because your body doesn't tolerate them very well. So you may be someone who's better suited for a really low fat diet versus a high fat diet. And there's a number of different genes as well that could, if you're an ApoE3, ApoE4, you may not be someone who would ever want to go on a carnivore, keto, or high fat diet, because you may be prone to oxidating your cholesterol. You may be prone to driving atherosclerosis. You may be prone to driving Alzheimer's. And so this is not a monogenic thing. It's polygenic, which means multiple genes are incorporated. But, this is a more advanced thing for someone who's really wanting to dial in their lifestyle, their nutrition, their training based on genetics. But so the primary thing is, well, what ratio works best for me? And as I said, it took me 10 to 12 years to figure out, because I went through high fat, low carb diet. I went through high carb, low fat diet. I went through every version within. And it wasn't until I was probably 30 years old competing at the Mr. Olympia contest where I was like, oh, I know exactly what diet works best for me. And it has to change. It has to be dynamic based on, well, how hard am I training? How much volume am I training? how frequently am I training? Those play in for me. And I don't sway them a lot, but I certainly sway my calories based on all of that. So big takeaways is like, you can spend the next 5 to 10 years trying to figure out operationalizing it. You can try to follow someone else's diet, which invariably could work for you, but very less likely to work. Or you can test and look at your genetics and have somebody read and say, hey, what approach to diet is going to work most effectively for me? I tend to be sort of this moderate carb, moderate fat person. Not a lot of people are like that. Some people are like, hey, you need a lot of fats, not a lot of carbs. You got terrible carbohydrate genes, terrible inflammatory genes, drop those down. Another thing, for example, with me is I have terrible saturated fat genes. Like my body doesn't like saturated fats. And I feel that. I feel sluggish when I consume saturated fats. And so like, okay, well, if I went on a carnivore diet, 1, I'm going to feel sluggish. 2, I'm going to drive up insulin resistance from saturated fats. Yes, there's a gene for that. And I may actually make myself more likely to have something like atherosclerosis. So I don't want to do that. Now, for many years, I didn't know that. I consumed a huge amount of red meats. And again, I don't think red meats are bad. I think you have to look at an individual's genetics and say, well, how are you suited to tolerate each individual type of nutrient? And so that's really complex, high-level stuff, but it's relatively cheap to operationalize it. A genetic test is somewhere between, $200 and $500, depending where you do it and how it's read. It's not a huge thing. I mean, it's certainly not zero cost, but it's, if you're someone who wants to optimize your free body composition, optimize for longevity, optimize for daily energy, what we call a daily optimized experience, then you should consider it for sure. So let's go a little bit deeper into how to operationalize a bodybuilding diet. So we always start with foundational protein, and we say you need between probably 0.8 and 1.2 grams per pound of lean body mass. I usually use lean body mass. Not everyone does. I like lean body mass. So, if I'm a 220-pound guy, I'm probably consuming somewhere between 200 and 240 grams of protein on a daily basis. And now, why such a range instead of being so exact? Well, not everyone digests, absorbs, and assimilates protein the same way. Some people have lower stomach acid. Maybe they have microbiome issues. If you have lower stomach acid, you're going to hate 240 grams of protein. You're going to really have a hard time. You're going to get bloating, gas, indigestion. You should never have gas and indigestion, by the way, ever. I don't believe it's something you should experience. And so if you are, something's wrong. You're either consuming the wrong proteins, you're either consuming the wrong carbohydrates, the wrong fibers. So you want to look at that and like, hey, how do I improve this? And maybe that's like going into a stool analysis, a microbiome analysis, seeing what you're deficient in, seeing what you need more of, and then supplementing that accordingly. But yeah, so if you ever have any digestive issues from any type of foods, you should absolutely do some testing as well. And that one there is Genova Diagnostics is the company we use. We use something called the GI effects or the GI map. And those will give you direct correlates with like, oh, hey, you have SIBO or you have some microbiome overgrowth or, any number of different things that we can experience in these GI map type tests. So between 0.8 and 1.2 grams per pound lean mass of protein. Now, that can go up. Generally doesn't go down, but that can go up. So there's certainly times in my life where I was consuming 1.5 grams per pound and I could digest it, I could absorb it, I could assimilate it. And I found, in fact, that my recovery was better. That doesn't mean that your recovery is going to be better. I find my recovery was better. Now, looking at my genes, I've got great genes for, muscle building. I've got great genes for power. I have generally poor genes for inflammation. So for whatever reason, my body was able to take in huge amounts of protein and digest, absorb, assimilate, because it's not about what you eat, is it? It's about what you digest, you absorb, and you assimilate. And that changes based on my digestion. That changes based on my hormones. That changes based on the demand I put on my body. If I'm massively stressed, my ability to digest, absorb, something goes down. If I'm training hard, yet recovering really well, now my body ramps up its ability to synthesize protein, stimulate mTOR, absorb carbohydrate, et cetera. So I want to look at those things and say, well, what demand am I placing on my body? How healthy is my body? How well am I sleeping? How great is my digestion? And then ramp up from there. So the reason I am recording this video specifically, or this podcast, is because I have a few hundred clients that work under our umbrella now, and all of them are asking, like, well, how do you approach building a diet? And so this is really how this is. So I start with protein, and you come to me and you say, hey, you're a 220-pound male. Let's say you need 2,700 calories. I'm going to have this, like, probably, 200 to 240 grams of protein as your base. And then I'm going to look at your genetics and say, well, do you tolerate higher fats or do you tolerate higher carbs? And maybe you don't tolerate either of them very well, and that's a different consideration. But generally, I like to stay, we're going to choose the amount of carbohydrates that you can use. Now, I'm not an anti-carbohydrate person at all. At some points in my life, I would have said maybe similar things a little bit differently, but the goal with carbohydrates is how little can you consume and get as much out of it as you can, in my opinion. If I'm trying to build maximum muscle, then it's never how much can you consume. It's how little can I consume and still build the muscle at the trajectory that I want to. Now, for some people, like myself as a bodybuilder, I was consuming 900 to 1,000 grams of carbs a day. Now, did I need that much? I don't know, but that's what it required. That's what put me on the trajectory of growth that I looked for. So that's a lot of carbohydrates. Each meal was between 150 and 200 grams of carbohydrates. That's a lot of carbs. Now, that probably drove insulin resistance. It probably drove atherosclerosis, but it certainly drove performance. And so it's always a trade-off, right? How much carbohydrate are you earning? So what are my considerations there? Well, if I'm really insulin sensitive, meaning I'm probably already lean, probably training really well, probably keep my blood glucose relatively low at rest, well, I can tolerate huge amounts of carbohydrates and use them. If I'm someone who's maybe a little over fat, maybe a little insulin resistant, maybe my glucose runs high, high glucose, if you're anything over 100, you're pre-diabetic. So if we don't want to be there. A healthy glucose is between, I would say, 75 and 90. So if you're in that range, great, taking more carbs. If you're higher, then we actually going to use a lower carbohydrate diet, because what we don't want to do is drive insulin resistance. Why? Because insulin resistance will drive inflammation. Why do we not want inflammation? That drives cortisol. Why do we not want cortisol? Because cortisol can ultimately cause, one, lower testosterone, two, muscle breakdown. So there's so many little nuanced things here that we're like, we have to be testing your blood glucose at rest. We have to be testing how well your body genetically tolerates carbohydrates, how well your body genetically tolerates saturated fats. Okay, so we covered proteins. We talked a little bit about carbohydrates. Now, as I said, I'm not anti-carb. I want to take as much carb as we need to drive aggressive performance. So if at any point you're finding a decreased performance, you're not really feeling pumps, you're not really feeling energized in the gym, I don't know, maybe you don't feel like you're getting stronger over time, then we have to look and troubleshoot, right? We say, well, why is this? Are you not producing energy fast enough? That's one possibility. Maybe your mitochondria are sluggish, not producing energy fast enough, which could be from over-consuming carbohydrates. Or do you not have enough carbohydrates, which are very, they could be a similar expression like, hey, coach, I'm tired, but it may be a different cause. So if you're over-consuming carbohydrates, you can be tired. If you're under-consuming carbohydrates, you could also be tired. So like, well, how do you know? The answer is practice. The answer is years and years and years of understanding what symptoms to look for. And, if generally, if you're under-consuming, it's relatively easy to tell, because you're under consuming. And so then in which case we'll bump your carbohydrates up, maybe drop the proteins in a little bit or drop the fats in a little bit and give you a little more fuel. And we'll see, does that give you more drive? And the beautiful thing about carbohydrate that not everyone understands is carbohydrate really plays into your stress. So if you're someone who's constantly running high on stress, if you're always overstressed, the reason most people who are stressed reach for carbohydrates is because carbohydrates tend to modulate cortisol. Insulin and glucose go up, cortisol goes down. So that's why if I'm stressed or anxious and I can consume sugar, I feel better. And this is why people also, when they do a contest prep, they do a cheat day and they look better. That's a good indication you're probably overtrained and your body has too much cortisol. So we drop the cortisol down, all of a sudden, boom, the body sucks up all these nutrients. You look amazing. That's one of the reasons why, understanding how carbohydrates affect your body, super, super important. So again, I could talk a lot more on carbohydrate consumption, on how to choose it, when to choose it, the types to choose. But I'm trying to keep this video at a reasonable length. One final thing to consider is, do high glycemic and low glycemic carbs matter? The answer is, of course. Does the source of carbohydrate matter? Of course. People who say if it fits your macros is the way to go are simply uneducated or undereducated when it comes to understanding how performance works, because calories are just the base layer of the pyramid, right? They're down here. Then on top of that, now we have the biochemical influence of all nutrients, and that's carbohydrates and fats and proteins, also influence how the cell operates, how the genes are expressed. So if I just hit my macros, that's great. That's a really good start for someone who's a beginner. Like, kudos to you, you're hitting your macros. But if you want to perform, now it's like, well, where are those foods coming from? Is it whole foods? Are they organic? Are they ancestrally grown, meaning conventionally grown cow versus a grass-fed cow? Not the same. Different types of fats. So what type of source is coming? And then on top of that, then we start looking at nutrient timing, right? We say, well, what time of the day are these coming? Because that can also play in. Is the difference as big as macros? No, like macros is going to be your foundational base of the pyramid. And then we look at the source, and then we look at the timing. And those things are the things that you're going to start looking at as you become more advanced, right? Did I pay attention to timing when I was preparing for the Mr. Olympia? Absolutely. I knew exactly when something was going in because I'm trying to create predictability. If my objective is getting as lean as possible, that means I need to perform well every day. That means I need to sleep well every day. That means I need to recover well every day. I want every day to be Groundhog Day. I want it to be exactly the same so that I can know when I make this slight little change, I can predict what the outcome is going to be. Meaning if I'm always consuming 3,000 or 4,000 calories a day and I go to 3,800, I know that I'm going to be in a net 1,400 calorie deficit for the week. I might lose, on average, this is not how it generally works, but I can assume I'll lose about half a pound per week because I'm in about half a pound of caloric deficit. It doesn't always work like that. That's the basic math. It doesn't always work like that. But I can know that if I take a slight amount away or put a slight amount more work in, then I should be in a net deficit because it's consistent. So the way you think of making change in a bodybuilding diet, it's either you change your net inputs or you change your net outputs, right? Net inputs is what I eat. Net outputs is what I do, right? I'm fidgeting, I'm moving, I'm getting my steps in. Those are all net outputs. Training volume, total training time. Even just breathing is an output, right? And so we're really just breathing, like how do I increase this carbon excretion versus carbon consumption? And right, carbon is carbs and fats, both carbon chain molecules that if I consume more, the body retains more carbon. If I excrete more via the breath, the body excretes more carbon. That's really the equation we're trying to figure out as someone who's trying to get leaner. Like what influences carbon in, carbon out, sort of net carbon consumption. So then moving on to fats, well, what do we do with fats? Generally, the minimum, or sorry, say differently, the average, I would say, maybe not minimum, is about 30% of your calories. So again, if you're consuming 3,000 calories a day, you're looking at, I don't know, maybe 900 calories. So 100 grams of fat, relatively, not huge, not low, moderate amount of fat. And now where those come from matters, right? Because I'm consuming all omega-6s, when that be from grapeseed oil and sunflower oil. Well, those have a really different biochemical impact on my body than, say, saturated fats or or omega-3s. So, like, I want to pay attention to those. So is it mostly polyunsaturated? Is it mostly monounsaturated or mostly saturated? And the way that I look at this is often genetic. So my body does really well with some monounsaturated fats, really poorly with too much polyunsaturated fats. I can feel the inflammation accumulating in my body. So I need to make sure that any polyunsaturated fats I'm consuming are generally really high quality or really, really controlled in the dose. And so most of my fat now, and even as a competitor, was coming from olive oil, was coming from maybe some eggs, obviously some high quality meats, which again, as I said, the fat content in those meats is really different based on where they're coming from. So operationalizing fats, always consider the fat that's coming from your meats first, make sure it's the highest quality, and then you're adding in really small amounts generally of fats from the highest quality fats you can find. So fish oils counts in there. Olive oil, I would say, is number one or number two, then maybe some egg yolks. And beyond that, there's not a huge amount of fat that's generally added into a bodybuilding diet. We want to kind of keep the fats relatively moderate and make sure our sources are really high. I'm not also against things like coconut oil, like saturated fats. Saturated fats can be really, really great. We just don't overconsume them on a bodybuilding diet because generally we're trying to be calorically moderate. But again, if you drop the carbs down, maybe the fats go up, right? So that's really how this works. Bodybuilding diet, at the end of the day, is a math equation. It's what am I consuming? Carbon in versus carbon out. And so by creating Groundhog Day, consistently day in, day out, I can know that, hey, this is what I'm always consuming. And if I'm not losing fat or weight fast enough, well, I need to pull something out or increase something. And so when we start our bodybuilding diet in the first few weeks, we're not trying to make any changes, right? I'll generally not put someone in a caloric deficit in the beginning. I want them to normalize their diet. I want you to have enough energy so that you can train well. We always want to drive performance. I want you to have enough satiety so you're not thinking about food all the time. I don't want you thinking about food all the time. I want you to have enough satiety so you can feel great, improve energy, and improve your health first. So weeks 1 through 4 of a bodybuilding transformation diet shouldn't be a massive caloric deficit, which is why generally I start people 20 weeks out from a bodybuilding show, or, giving yourself 5 months. Because I just want the first 4 weeks to be like just whole foods. Start with these foods that aren't driving you to want to overconsume, right? Because the first problem most people are trying to solve, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is behavior. We're trying to change behavior. We're trying to create adherence. And if I take you out or away from all these super hyper palatable foods and just give you chicken and broccoli for the first month, you're going to be miserable. So what I need to do is I need to just take you these hyper palatable foods away, but not give you a massive deficit. Still allow you to have all the foods you need. So when you're hungry, you eat. And that way we change the behavior away from this constantly seeking foods because they give me dopamine to just getting the foods that give me the nutrients I need. So it takes away from this hedonic treadmill of dopamine up and dopamine down, and dopamine up and dopamine down. Solve that problem first. So we've created a regimented, consistent eating schedule that isn't driven by impulse. Start there. Then I can start pulling away calories a little bit and giving someone the opportunity to be successful, right? Because if I negligently say, hey, Bill, I'm going to put you from eating Snickers bars for lunch every day or post-workout to now just eating, the most plain foods in the planet, you're going to fail. As a coach, I believe it's my responsibility to help you be successful. If you're not being successful on a bodybuilding diet, it's not your fault, it's mine. And coaches, hear me. People are paying you to hold the responsibility and get them in shape. Just because someone didn't adhere to their diet, you failed as a coach, not me, not that client. The client is doing the best they can. If you're not capable of coaching somebody through the transition from a normal standard American diet to a bodybuilding diet, it's not the client's fault. It's your failure as a coach. Learn how to coach through a gradual transition. Learn how to coach through behavior change. That's the coach's job, not the client's job. A coach is someone who coaches when shit goes hard, when the shit hits the fan. Coach steps in and goes, guys, here's how we're going to approach this, right? If you write a workout plan, someone could pull a workout plan or a diet plan off of ChatGPT. That's not what they need from you. They need support and accountability when things start to go south. And it's not just like, hey, you're not disciplined enough, you're not motivated enough, you're not working hard enough. No, that's bullshit. You failed as a coach. So one of our values at Muscle Intelligence is 100% success. What does that even mean? Well, 100% success means everyone wins every day. Doesn't mean that we're going to get you exactly where you want to go in 90 days, like our cover model shredded. No, we're going to help you win every day. And so there's a gradual progression toward a worthy ideal, right? I'm not going to get you from 100% or 100 pounds of body fat to 10 pounds of body fat in 12 weeks. Like, could we? Maybe, if you're going to, suffer your way through it. But then as soon as you stop, you're going to gain all that weight right back. So we don't want that. We want to teach you how to operationalize lifetime success, and that happens by winning every day. And guys, rest assured, it's possible for you. You can absolutely shift off of hyper-palatable foods, the Doritos and the chips and the whatever. Yeah, you can shift off, and it doesn't necessarily even require discipline. In the beginning, it's a little bit of discipline. It's really creating new habits, but it doesn't have to be so unbelievably difficult. It just has to be like the right approach, the right system, so to speak. At Muscle Intelligence, we do what's called the foundational phase, which is, as I say, not a caloric deficit for the first month. Sometimes it's not for the first 3 months for some people. Like if it takes you 3 months, it generally doesn't. It's usually 30 days. But if it takes you that long, I don't care, because my goal is to help you win long-term, right? I want you to win now and forever, not just like, oh gosh, I got in shape once. I got down to 10% body fat once, and then I was 25% body fat for the rest of my life. No, don't do that, right? Rewire your brain, rewire your habits. So, gents, ladies, this is how we operationalize a bodybuilding diet with a Muscle Intelligence approach. So month 1 is really focused on rewiring the palate, getting you on the right foods, getting you eating consistently, getting you on schedule. Then in, call it phase 2, which may or may not be month 2. Phase 2, we start moving into what we call an adaptation phase. Adaptation phase looks more and more like I either need to be building muscle or I need to be losing fat in a slightly more aggressive way, because now we've got control of our behaviors, we've got control of our impulses, we've got control of our ability to adhere to a diet. Well, now it's just making small incremental changes. So now it's this, we're losing body fat, it's this small incremental decrease in calories and allowing the body to change every single week. There should be a relatively linear, it's never linear, but it should be relatively linear downward progression toward where you want to go. Now, inevitably, you're going to stall. Inevitably, you're going to stall. So if we have a 3-week or a 4-week consecutive progression downwards, that's great. If it goes, for some people, it goes 90 days, it's consecutive. That's great. That means you've got relatively healthy metabolism, strong mitochondria, great programming, because programming really plays into how well your body burns through fat. So does sleep, so do hormones. So if you're someone who's deficient in thyroid and testosterone, it's never going to be linear. If you have somebody who's got great thyroid and great testosterone, maybe that progression can be much more linear, meaning it's constant and progressing in the right direction. If you have hormone dysfunction, chances are it's going to stop much, much sooner, in which case now we got to intervene and find ways to increase that fat loss. And maybe it's taking things to support thyroid and testosterone. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's dropping into more of a deficit. Maybe it's giving you a refeed, right? If someone's been dropping consistently, maybe we let them eat back up for a few weeks, let them sort of gain that performance edge again, get that mental edge again, regain that confidence, that recovery. Because if we're in a recovery deficit, this so-called adaptive capacity deficit, meaning my body's not adapting well then eating up for a couple of weeks, maybe so-called diet break, can actually allow you to perform well again, to gain that training back again, to allow your body to kickstart that fat loss again. So that's phase 2. Phase 2 is, as I said, focus on adaptation. Most people, it's like we're making a 10% decrease in calories until it stops, another 10% decrease in calories till it stops. I don't generally like to go anywhere more than 30% under someone's total daily expenditure. So if your basal metabolic rate is 2,500 calories and you're burning 500 calories a day with exercise, you got 3,000 calories to work with as your total daily expenditure. Basal metabolic rate, you burn in a coma. 500 calories is your additional stuff on top of that from training, from non-exercise attributed thermogenesis, moving, fidgeting, whatever. So we got 3,000 calories. I generally will never go under 30% less than that. So if we're under 2,300 calories for too long, I think it still works. For sure it can work, but it's just very difficult for a lot of people mentally. And you start cutting it, like your performance starts to suck, your training starts to suck. And remember, this is a bodybuilding diet. This isn't just a fat loss diet. If it was a fat loss diet, we can absolutely put you on 1,500 calories for 3 months. You're going to lose muscle and fat really quickly. But at the end of a bodybuilding diet, you look better. Whereas most people, if they go into too much of a deficit, they look worse. So if I put you, if your total daily expenditure is 3,000 calories and I put you at 2,000 calories, what's the first thing that happens? Your body stops wanting to move. Your body, there's no more fidgeting. It's this, right? It's like I don't move, I don't talk, I don't do the things that actually burn significantly more calories than you think. So if I put you in too much of a deficit, you get this metabolic, it's not a metabolic shutdown, it's a shutdown of your body. Your body wants to conserve calories. And so I don't really believe that's a good idea for anyone. And certainly your performance is going to go out the window unless you're obviously taking performance-enhancing drugs, which is what generally all professional bodybuilders are doing. Myself included, guilty, right? So terrible coaches throughout my career that I've worked with are like, well, cut more calories, take more gear. Cut more calories, take more gear. That's what the bodybuilding approach is. If you want to know how to work with a guru in the bodybuilding space, I'll tell you right now, you can do it yourself. When it's time to cut calories, take more gear. When it's time to cut calories, take more gear. That's how bodybuilders work. So they maintain all their muscle and cut their calories. There's times when I was being advocated to eat like 1,300 calories a day. I was like, no fucking way. Sorry, pardon my French. No fucking way. These people have no idea what they're doing. And I'm like, oh, just take more of this and eat less food. And you're just like, why would anyone do that? It doesn't make any sense. And then finally finding an intelligent approach, you're like, oh, I can burn fat really fast, take a fraction of the gear and still grow and be awesome and feel awesome and not be killing myself in the meantime. There's very few coaches in this world, and I won't say none, but very few coaches in this world who actually give a shit about you. What they give a shit about is bragging about your outcomes. Like, oh, I got 74 pro card wins. I don't give a shit. How many people have you hurt? How many people actually still feel good and look good when they're done the contest prep? How many people are you calling a week after the show and helping them with their diet then? That's the stuff you're looking for. Like, I got 19 pro card wins. Great. Awesome. Like, I really believe you can get a rhinoceros in shape for a contest, but put them in a caloric deficit and get them to run a treadmill all day. But are they actually fulfilled in life? Are they happy? Like, can you do both, right? That to me is the hallmark of a successful coach. Now, I know some, for sure. I know some that work for me because they actually give a shit about you and your result, not just about taking your money and getting your pro card so they can put a badge of honor on their social media page. Again, that's a rant for another time. But keep yourself safe, keep yourself healthy, do this in an effective way, and hire someone who gives a shit and does it in a good way, who can track you. Now, the beautiful thing about modern day technology, there's an enormous amount of tracking out there, right? We can track your resting blood glucose. That's helpful. We can track blood work consistently. That's super helpful. We can track your HRV, heart rate variability. That's super helpful. We can track your sleep with an Oura ring. Super helpful. The more we can track and understand physiologically what's happening inside your body instead of just physically on the outside, allows us to make way more effective decisions. So an effective coach now is doing all those things. Now, listing all those things I said, just talking about diet, how much time do you think that takes? A good coach. So if they're giving you 10 minutes a week, you're like, well, they're not paying attention to any of that stuff. A really good coach, unfortunately, needs to be spending 1 to 2 hours a week, which is generally what I spend per client, on just understanding their internal physiological parameters. What's their glucose? What's the recovery like? What's their sleep like? You know, what's their biofeedback? What's the stuff they're telling you? And if they're spending less than that, they're probably not doing you a justice. Now, here's the catch. Let's say 8 hours of my month is a lot of time. If I only get 160 hours in the month, that's 5% of my month, 8 hours per client. That's a lot of time. Guess what? I can't charge you $200 a month anymore. I can't, right? Otherwise, I can't do the job you're looking for. That's the unfortunate reality with really good people, really good coaches, is like, you don't charge somebody $200 a month and do a great job because you can't yet. There may be an opportunity in the future with like really great software that comes out, which we're working on in MS Intelligence. How do we operationalize the ability to actually help people faster by aggregating all their data into a performance dashboard, right? So if I have a performance dashboard where I can log on and see Frank's training, heart rate variability, I can see his heart rate, I can see his recovery, I can see his continuous glucose monitor data, I can see his Oura data in one place. Bang, I can make quick decisions, change the program, change the diet. It takes me 10 minutes. It doesn't exist yet. So that's what we're working on. That's what you're working against. So if you're someone who wants to be in the best shape of your life, learn all of this stuff, go deeper, like learn all the things that are influencing the way your body burns fat, the way your body produces energy, the way your body recovers, the way your body contracts muscles, the way your body digests food, absorb, assimilate food, and learn all of this stuff and start to understand like, okay, what do I need to do? Now, the guys that work with me don't want to learn any of this stuff. Like, dude, I don't want to learn any of it. I just want you to pay attention to it. Fine. And there's people out there who can do that. But because like, and I think that's what I encourage you to do, right? If you're someone who's on a really big mission in life, you're like, I've got a mission to do something really great in life. I've got a purpose. I've got a mission. I've got clarity. I've got, path, direction, path, outcome. Then I suggest hire somebody to just do it for you. Like I want to spend all of my day thinking about that for you, because I know that if you fulfill your mission, the world's a better place because of that. That's what lights me up. I always say like, I'm the world's greatest number 2. I'm the guy that's going to stand behind you and prop you up when nobody can see you, and be watching all those biometric data, be looking at all the things that ultimately allow you to be the best version of yourself. So you don't have to spend any conscious time and energy on, well, what should I be eating right now? Am I doing the right thing? Am I recovering? Am I going to lose body fat? Don't do any of that. And I'll say this, you're going to get into it what you put out, what you're going to get out of it, what you put into it, right? Not everyone's willing to put the time in. They want the outcome, but they're not willing to put in the time. And time sometimes means like, hey man, like 1, you got to talk to your coach once a week. 2, you got to do some testing and lab work. 3, you actually got to do the things you're told to do, which means like, we'll keep it as simple as possible, but you may have to take 30 supplements a day. You may have to eat 3 meals a day. Those meals may need to come from a very specific place. It can't just be like, oh, I stopped at Wendy's today and I got a burger, or I stopped at Subway. Like, no, man, we can't do that. So it depends really what you're looking for. And so hopefully that helps. I'm trying to operationalize the bodybuilding diet here for you guys. So after years and years and years, 20 years, in fact, of highly competitive bodybuilding, it took me 10 years to figure out what actually works for my body. Now I do my genetic tests, and I can reinforce that in a minute. I actually looked at my genetics this morning. It's just crazy to see how it took me 10 to 15 years to land on exactly what my genetics are telling me is important. And it's a beautiful insight to go, your intuition works, but it takes you a long time to figure it out. So for me, it's basically a Mediterranean style diet. It's basically lots of monounsaturated fats, low fat proteins or lower fat proteins primarily, like not so much saturated fat. It's lots of vegetables, lots of polyphenols. So polyphenols, you get dark chocolate, berries, coffee, things like that. Those are super, super helpful for me and my physiology. Whereas if I went on a carnivore diet, I'd probably die. Or even a keto diet, I probably would shorten my life. And I'm not against the carnivore and keto diet. I'm saying for my DNA, it's a terrible idea. My body actually wants way more plant matter, way more vegetables to support the antioxidant system rather than driving pro-oxidative stress. My body doesn't do well with oxidative stress, doesn't do well with inflammation, or doesn't have strong genetic pathways to support that. So really, really different than most people out there who may be looking to decide which diet is best for you. So if you haven't already done your genetics, highly advise you to do that. You can do that at muscleintelligence.com/DNA. You can also do it at dnaperform.com. Both of those will go to the same place, allow you to do just your DNA panel, performance panel, what we call it. And ultimately, if you're interested, you can work with one of our genetic experts who are unbelievably brilliant. And they'll walk you through a pretty extensive view of your panel. And if you want to go even further and take that genetics and integrate it into an effective performance plan, we now do that here at Muscle Intelligence. I think we're one of the first movers, one of the first people in the world to do a genetically integrated performance plan. That means nutrition, that means training, that means supplementation, based on genetics, based on blood, urine, stool. They have an integrated model that ultimately lets you to look at whatever's going to be best for you and do what's best for you based on your genetics and what your current state and current goal is. Hopefully that wasn't too long. Hopefully you guys got some value out of that. If you have any questions, please drop them below in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, I do read all the comments. I would love to hear from you. If you're not already following the Muscle Intelligence podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, on YouTube, please go ahead and do that and leave us up to a 5-star review. Your reviews do drive the success of this podcast, and we want to continue to grow this incredible mission to help you perform at your best every single day so you can show up for what's most important to you. Ladies, gentlemen, I love you. I feel you. I hope this was valuable, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.